I'm in the big leagues, told them don't miss me. Ballin' like Houston, ayy, feeling like Whitney. I need a bag, bruh, send it through quickly. I'm making his dog, like I'm in the big leagues. Told him that I gotta go, dog. I'm riding a road, y'all. I think that I'm back in my bag now. So I need that go, y'all. Got hits when he throwing the fastball. Just too quick for it, peeling off like the whip orange. Seen they effort, this piss poor, I got too much.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Another Turnover, the basketball podcast where a basketball fan with zero basketball credibility gives his opinions on what's going on in the NBA, opinions that nobody asked for. As always, I am your host, Mr. Chris Aaron Murphy, aka AA Ron, and ladies and gentlemen, let's just jump right into it. Folks, this is the last show here in February, here in this beautiful, wonderful Black History Month. So, like I've done in the previous episodes for this month, I want to give my final Black History trivia question to start us off. So, question I have for y'all. Who has played the most games ever in the NBA? Most ever games, the total amount of games, including regular season and playoffs. Who has played the most? If you are a real NBA fan, the answer will not surprise you. But the answer will be revealed at the end of the episode, so make sure you stick around and find out who it is. But folks, for today's show, this will be my recap for the month of February for all things that have happened in the NBA. So let's talk about it. We've done this a few times throughout the show. We did a January recap as well as a December recap as well. So let's talk about it. Let's look at where some of the teams are. Let's take a look at, the MVP ladder. Let's take a look at a few things. So let's start in the Eastern Conference. So I want to take a look at the record and the standings, and we will go from there. I'm also going to do some comparisons, to where we were compared to the end of January. So let's do it. Let's get right into it. But let's talk about the number one seed. The number one seed in the Eastern Conference is still the Miami Heat with a 38-21 record. So the Miami Heat have stayed pretty much where they were. They were number one at the end of January as well, if you remember correctly. So they've been pretty solid. They've been getting healthy. Bam Adebayo, Jimmy Butler have been consistently in the lineup. And you've got solid play across the board with Kyle Lowry, Duncan Robinson, as well as Tyler Hero being their scoring spark plug off the bench. So they have pretty much stayed where they were, but still number one in the Eastern Conference compared to where they were last month. Second team, also in the same spot from last month, is the Chicago Bulls. Now, the Chicago Bulls, this has been pretty impressive because they have dealt with a few injuries over the past month, but they have still stayed within that second spot. They also are actually 38-21, so technically tied for the Miami Heat for the number one spot, but the Miami Heat do own the tiebreaker as it stands in the season right now. So they are pretty much where they are. Had two All-Stars this year in Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan, so shout out to them. They're playing some pretty good basketball. Still without Alex Caruso, one of their solid rotational pieces on their team, but they have been pretty good so far and staying at the second spot within February. Now this team, the Philadelphia 76ers, jumped up 2 spots. They are currently the third seed in the Eastern Conference. Now, we've talked quite a bit about the Philadelphia 76ers, so they swapped, their superstars. Ben Simmons is now in Brooklyn. James Harden is now reunited with Daryl Morey in Philadelphia. So it'll be interesting to see how the chemistry is going to be in Philly with the new piece in James Harden and Joel Embiid, how they are going to coexist. I think the pick and roll between those two players could be deadly, but we'll see what happens. It'll be interesting nonetheless, but I am looking forward. How great would it be if the 76ers and the 76ers and the Brooklyn Nets met in the playoffs? That would be prime television, I tell you that. But pretty solid play from them, up 2 spots from where they were in January, so playing pretty well. The Cleveland Cavaliers are in the 4th seed with a 35-23 record. Down 1 spot, but still having a very solid season. I think as I'm recording this Thursday night, they did just lose to the Detroit Pistons, but still in the 4th spot in the Eastern Conference. A solid year. They had an all-star in Darius Garland. Jarrett Allen was also named an injury replacement. So no one has expected the Cleveland Cavaliers to do what they have been doing. Shout out to JB Bickerstaff, their head coach, having those boys playing really well and some really good basketball. So the Cleveland Cavaliers are in the 4th spot. In the 5th spot is the defending champions, the Milwaukee Bucks. They are up 1 spot from where they were last month at the end of January. Giannis is putting up crazy numbers, which I'm going to talk about those numbers more in detail a little bit later in the show. But Giannis is playing incredibly well. Chris Middleton, Drew Holiday, they have also been putting in solid production this year. And remember, they dealt with their fair share of injuries too to start the season. Their big three has kind of been in and out of the lineup in spots, but you definitely don't want to be a Cleveland, somebody who's had a great year in the 4th spot and end up playing like Milwaukee in the 5th spot in the first round. That definitely would not be that definitely would not be good for Cleveland. We'll say that if they met Milwaukee in the first round, but we still got some time to go for that. 6th spot, Boston has moved up 2 spots from where they were at the end of January. They had an 8-game win streak throughout the month of February, beating some really solid teams. They're playing really, really well. Boston has done, they've definitely turned it around. Ime Udoka, whether it's, his speeches or whatever it is, because I was definitely worried about Boston. I was like, man, they are severely underachieving. But they're getting back on track. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are both having pretty good years. Marcus Smart as well. They traded for Derek White. Robert Williams has been a really, really solid big man for them, for that team and that squad and how they run their offense. And Al Horford been a good veteran, bringing that veteran presence to that team. So Boston Celtics getting it back on track in the 6th spot. Now for your 4 play-in teams, you have the Toronto Raptors in the 7th spot with a 32-25 record, up 2 spots from where they were a month ago. So solid play across the board with one All-Star in Fred VanVleet playing in the All-Star game. You've also got, Pascal Siakam, Scotty Barnes, who's had a pretty decent rookie season as well. Definitely, I would say no one expected the Toronto Raptors to kind of be at this spot. So they've done pretty well for themselves. Shout out to the Toronto Raptors. I ain't mad at them. I ain't mad at them at all. But you have the Brooklyn Nets in the 8th spot, falling 4 spots from where they were at the end of January. Now, obviously, injury to KD. Kyrie has played, half the games, due to the mandate in New York City. So they went on a pretty significant losing streak and dropped 4 spots. So that definitely makes sense. They're 31-28 right now. Obviously traded James Harden and, got Ben Simmons and Seth Curry and Andre Drummond in return. I do definitely think that, Brooklyn long-term won that trade, but that's a story for another day. Now, interesting thing to watch about Brooklyn as Ben Simmons is returning to the lineup. Reports are that he is going to be back in the lineup sooner rather than later. The New York City mandate, the new mayor of New York City, I can't remember his name right now, but the new mayor of New York City is saying that, vaccine requirements for indoor sports and athletes are going to be laxed here soon. So does that mean before playoff time or whatnot? So can Kyrie Irving become a full-time participant before the season ends? Definitely looks like it is heading in that direction. So we shall see what happens there. But a pretty significant skid for the Brooklyn Nets, but I'm not too worried about them. I definitely don't think they'll end up being a play-in team potentially, but it does all depend on if, when Kevin Durant comes back and if Kyrie Irving can be a full-time participant, because if those two things do not happen before the end of the season, then I do see them being a play-in team, but we shall see what happens there. 9th team, you got the Charlotte Hornets with a 29-31 record. Charlotte is down 2 spots. They've dealt with their own fair share of injuries, just like some other teams. You have had Gordon Hayward with the ankle injury, which I feel so bad for him. He seems like he can't catch a break. Gordon Hayward is out of the lineup. That's their, one of their almost 20 point per game scorers. LaMelo Ball and Miles Bridges have played pretty well and led that team pretty well, along with scary Terry Rozier has had a pretty solid season as well. But they have definitely hit a bit of a skid in this latter half of the season, unfortunately. But making up that 10th spot, a team who has definitely, I would say, turned it around as well, is the Atlanta Hawks with a 28-30 record, making up that final play-in spot at 10. Now, Atlanta wasn't in the top 10 in the Eastern Conference the last time we spoke in January for their January recap. So they definitely have been playing well. They've been playing better recently. They had some injuries as well. Obviously we talked about already, traded Cam Reddish and got back. Who the heck did they get back in that trade? I'm forgetting who they got back in that trade, but they are definitely better than they were at the end of January. But that's the Eastern Conference. Now let's take a look at the Western Conference and see where we're at. So Phoenix is still number 1 in the Western Conference as well as the entire league with a 48-10 record. They are up in their percentage. They were about 80% win percentage last month. They're at 82%. If you round up, 83%, 82.8. Phoenix is hands down still the best team in the NBA. Win percentage, like I said, has gone up. Now, the thing to watch about Phoenix, the thing that, we got to look out for, no CP3 for the next 6 to 8 weeks. He had I think he had surgery on his non-shooting cam, like his thumb or whatever it was. So he's going to be out for the next 6 to 8 weeks. So the season ends, I think, in 7 weeks, as far as what I heard, 6 or 7 weeks. So, I mean, with the cushion that they have, they are 6.5 games ahead of the Warriors in the second spot. They could afford to not have Chris Paul come back throughout the season. I personally think they're going to be fine. Sure, they may lose, a few more games than they were expected to without Chris Paul, but I think they're going to be fine. They've given themselves enough of a cushion to press forward and press on. Remember, they played without Chris Paul for 2 playoff games last season, so I think the Phoenix Suns are going to be fine and still finish with the number 1 seed in the Western Conference. But like I just mentioned, Golden State is the 2nd seed, 42-17. Still trying to get healthy with Draymond Green out of the lineup as well as James Wiseman, 2 of their starting pieces. Klay Thompson looking pretty good. He had that game, I can't remember exactly who he played. He had that game where he scored 33 points, was coming down, shooting spot-up threes in transition. Like, he was shades of the old Klay. So I definitely am looking forward to seeing more Klay Thompson, him ramp up minutes and whatnot before we get to the playoffs, because I think the Golden State Warriors are going to be dangerous. 3rd seed is still the Memphis Grizzlies with a 41-19 record. They've just been solid all year round. Nobody wants to see this team in the playoffs, especially not the Warriors, because I think the Grizzlies have the Warriors number, and that would, if they both ended up winning their first round matchups, that would be a second round matchup that I don't think the Golden State Warriors, I think they could beat them, but I think it would be a whole lot tougher and a whole heck of a lot closer than a lot of people think. Like I said, but nobody wants to see them. They're going to be a tough out because they just play hungry. And Desmond Bane was in an interview a couple weeks ago, I think it was before the All-Star break, and was like, yeah, we believe we can win a chip. So they have, they've got attitude, and I definitely could see them making a deeper playoff run than people anticipated they would make. But the 4th seed the top 6 seeds in the Western Conference are actually the same. So you have the Utah Jazz, 36-22. Donovan Mitchell currently dealing with an ankle injury, but Utah playing some pretty solid basketball after starting the new year off horribly with they went 2-11 or whatever it was in January, some crazy stat, but they turned it around. Dallas Mavericks have been playing pretty well too, 35-24. They are the 5th seed in the Western Conference. Spencer Dinwiddie is on the team now. Traded for him and traded away Kristaps Porzingis to Washington. So I'll be interested to see the pairing between Spencer Dinwiddie and Luka Doncic. I think it could work. I think having another ball handler on that team, somebody who can create and get his own shot, I think is going to be beneficial. But we'll see. It should be interesting, but I definitely think that it could potentially work out well for Dallas. You've got Denver. Despite all their injuries, they are the 6th seed, 33-25 on the season. They are still working on getting healthy. I don't know as to when Jamal Murray is going to get back, but he should be back, I think, this season, if I'm not mistaken, after his ACL injury from last year. Jokić in the MVP talk, which I'm going to talk about a little later on in the show. Having them, he is pretty much the sole reason why they're winning their games because of all the injuries they've dealt with. Nikola Jokić is that dude. Play-in teams, you have the Minnesota Timberwolves in the 7th spot. They are up 1 spot. This team is young and hungry, led by their young stallions, Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns. Karl Anthony Towns being the newly crowned 3-point champion. A big man. Who would have thought? A center, the 3-point champion in the NBA. But they are playing really well. Clippers are down 1 spot, still with the injuries to Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, but still playing some pretty solid basketball. Shout out to Ty Lue for getting them basically where they are without their 2 main stars for most of the season. So shout out to Ty Lue for that. The Lakers are the 9th spot in the Western Conference, and it doesn't look like they'll be improving. They're pretty much in the same spot that they were at the end of last month. But now, no Anthony Davis for the next 5 to 6 weeks. He is out, unfortunately. I think it's a severe ankle sprain. I really hope he does get healthy, but Anthony Davis feels feel bad for the brother. Like, people want to call him Mr. Glass, and that's not a rebounding compliment. That ain't a good thing. So I hope he gets healthy. But the Lakers have I would say the Lakers are going to struggle throughout the remainder of the season. I could see them losing in a play-in scenario, depending on who they play. But we'll see what happens. The Portland Trailblazers playing better than expected without their 2 stars now. They traded away CJ McCollum. Damian Lillard has been out with an abdominal injury, but they are 25-34. They keep winning games, unfortunately, and the San Antonio Spurs also winning, but they can't catch up. But they are still hooping, like I said, without Damian Lillard, still in that play-in spot. And I do have to say, y'all know I was going to talk about San Antonio. They are in the 11th spot, only 2 games back from a play-in scenario. So as a Spurs fan, all I'm hoping for this year, I got one of the things I wanted. I only wanted 2 things. One, I wanted DeJounte Murray to be an all-star, and that happened. He was on the team. Sure, he was an injury replacement, but he was still on the team. He had a jersey just like the rest of them. And 2, I want to see us in the play-in. Now, we don't have to win our play-in game. Just like last year, I was like, look, we're not a playoff team. We're just not. I'm realistic. I'm a Spurs fanatic, but I'm a realistic fan. I'm not like the Dallas Cowboys fans. But I just want to see them in the play-in. If they can make it in the play-in, I'll be cool. I'll be happy about that. I will take that, and I'll be good. But those are the teams that make up the top 10/11 spots in the Western Conference, as well as the Eastern Conference, like I mentioned earlier. If the the playoffs started today, you'd have some pretty solid matchups. You'd have You'd have Philadelphia and Boston in a first-round matchup, which would be pretty incredible. You'd have Cleveland and Milwaukee taking on each other in a first-round matchup, which would be pretty cool. Depending on who won the 7 and 8 play-in matchup, so right now it's Toronto and Brooklyn. Let's say Brooklyn ended up winning that game. They would get the 7th spot. They would play Chicago in the first round. And that would be an incredible first-round matchup. I would definitely love to see that. But you also have some scenarios out west that could be pretty intriguing. I think Memphis and Denver would be a pretty solid opening series. You have, depending on whoever wins the 9-10 game, you could potentially have a rematch of last year's first round, Phoenix taking on the LA Lakers in the first round too in a rematch. Now, if the LA Lakers were fully healthy and Phoenix was fully healthy, I still would pick Phoenix in that matchup, but that would be pretty fun to watch in that rematch. But what else? You got the 4-5 matchup, Utah and Dallas, both 2 teams trying to get past the first round. I would give a slight edge to Dallas in that one, but it would be pretty interesting to say nonetheless. But that is what we have, like I said, for the season so far in terms of the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference. Let's look at some of the teams who have had the best records. But before we do that, I want to mention a really, really solid fantasy football podcast that I think you guys should tune into. Even though the NFL season has come and gone, fantasy managers know there is no such thing as an off season. Get a step ahead of your fantasy football competition by tuning into Leatherbrains, the fantasy football podcast. So 2 of my buddies are doing this podcast, Mr. Hunter Slapdog Amaruso and Matthew Scotty Holtmeyer, taking their listeners on a journey as they find the balance between analytics and whiskey, providing valuable insight along with laugh-out-loud commentary. So this is a show that they are doing on wherever you get your podcasts, on YouTube as well. You do not want to miss it. If you are into fantasy football and managing your fantasy football team well, you need to listen to Leatherbrains. That is Leatherbrains with a Z. Like I said, you can find them on YouTube as well as your favorite podcast app, as well as Twitter at Leatherbrains with a Z today. So make sure you check them out. It is a really, really funny and entertaining podcast, and I think you're going to love it. But like I said, let's transition into the teams with the best records so far, that had the best records throughout February. So we all knew it was coming. Phoenix 8-1 this February with an 89% win percentage, like 8-1. Pretty solid. They've had some pretty solid victories. They beat Brooklyn, they beat the Chicago Bulls, and they also beat the Milwaukee Bucks. So beating pretty much all of the Eastern Conference powerhouses, almost all of the Eastern Conference powerhouses. I think they beat Philly too in February, if I'm not mistaken. But the other team, Boston, with a 7-1 record throughout February, an 88% win percentage, beating out Charlotte beating out Denver, as well as beating out Atlanta. So a pretty solid outing for them so far through the month of February. And you've also got two teams tied with a 6-1 record. That is Utah and Memphis. 6-1 record, 86% win percentage, beating out the likes of Golden State and the New York Knicks, that is, for Utah. And then Memphis has beaten Charlotte as well as the New York Knicks themselves. So pretty solid outing so far. There are some games that are going on tonight as well that will probably change that just a little bit. Like I said, I'm recording this Thursday night. You're listening to this Friday. You have Memphis and Minnesota in a close one. You have Boston that is now 8-1. They just beat the Brooklyn Nets, and you have the Phoenix Suns who just beat the Oklahoma City Thunder, so they are now 9-1. So there you go. Live updates in the show as I'm recording it. But let's talk about the MVP favorites. So those are some of the best records. Let's talk about the MVP favorites so far in the NBA throughout the month of February. Now, I thought this was pretty crazy. So far, the three NBA MVP favorites are Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokić, and Giannis Antetokounmpo. If you follow me on Instagram, I put this on my story. There was a post that said, start one, bench one, cut one, which I feel like it was a lose-lose situation because, like, whoever you decide to cut, someone's going to make the argument for why they shouldn't be cut, and they would make a fair argument. Like, I made the argument that I said, start Giannis, bench Jokić, and cut Joel Embiid. But somebody came at me, in my DMs on my Another Turnover account and was talking about why Joel Embiid shouldn't be cut. And I agreed. Like, they made valid points. But like I said, it's a lose-lose situation here. But these are the three MVP favorites. So Joel Embiid averaging 29.6 points, 11.2 rebounds per game, as well as 4.5 assists per game. So putting up incredible numbers. Nikola Jokić with 26 points per game, 13.8 rebounds per game, and my most impressive stat for him specifically, 7.9 assists per game. Like, Nikola Jokić, he's having the same type of season he was last year. The Nuggets aren't winning as high a clip, but part of that is due to the injuries that they've had. But he's putting up crazy numbers. But let's take a look at Giannis. Giannis, 29.4 points, 11.2 assists, and 6 rebounds. So pretty much almost identical numbers to Joel Embiid, excluding the assists. He's averaging about 1.5 more assists than Joel Embiid is. So honestly, there's a few things that I want to talk about with this. So I think as much as the MVP award is an individual award, team success does play a role and is a factor into it. So I would say whoever's team finishes with the best record is more than likely going to win MVP. I feel like Giannis is not going to get it because there's a bit of voter fatigue. I feel like voter fatigue is a real thing. I think Nikola Jokić is probably not going to get it because the Denver Nuggets, they've struggled, obviously, with injuries. They are the 6th spot right now in the Western Conference. If they were to finish top 3, which I don't see happening in the Western Conference, I think he'd go back-to-back. But I do think Joel Embiid is going to end up getting the MVP award. So with them, the whole Ben Simmons drama that's happened all year, they are 3rd in the Eastern Conference right now. Tied, 3, 4, and 5 are tied right now. That's, one thing that you got to think about. But I do think Joel Embiid will get the edge and end up winning it. He has been pretty dominant. He's been healthy all year, knock on wood. So I definitely think, as it stands right now, I think Joel Embiid is leading the way. I wouldn't be surprised if it went to one of the other two, but I think Joel Embiid is leading the way slightly. Like I said, team success does play a role into who gets the MVP award. At least, that's my opinion. But let's transition again. Let's go around the association like we always do, and let's talk about some of the top stories of over the past week for the NBA. Story that came out just yesterday. Knicks' Kemba Walker has been shut down for the remainder of the season. 31-year-old guard will begin to prepare for next season after reaching an agreement with the New York Knicks to be shut down. So article reading on NBA.com says Walker and the New York Knicks have mutually agreed for the 4-time All-Star to be shut down for the remainder of the season. Team president Leon Rose has announced on Wednesday. He will spend the upcoming time away to get ready for the 2022-2023 campaign, which marks the final year of his contract. So, the New York Knicks shutting down Kemba Walker really doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, and here's why. So if you were going to shut him down, if you had any inkling that you were going to shut him down, like Kemba's not washed. He's still a really solid player. He just, with Tom Thibodeau, I mean, Tom Thibodeau is a defensive guy. He's not the best defender, of course not, but he's no scrub by any means. Like, did they look for a suitable trade partner for him? Like, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. It kind of sucks. Like, this is my whole thing. When a team shuts down a player, like, oh, you know, it's just business, right? It's, you know, it's just business. They shut him down. But when a player doesn't want to play for a team, oh, he's making a negative impact on this team. He's not loyal and all this stuff. And like, I don't get it. You're basically wasting like a significant portion of Kemba Walker's season by shutting him down, not letting him play. So like, I don't know. I never understood that. I think the whole situation is kind of dumb. But then again, it is the New York Knicks, and you know, when was the last time they won anything? A long time ago. But Kemba Walker not going to play anymore for the season. Too bad. Hopefully over the summer they find a suitable trade partner as he gets back to putting up productive minutes somewhere else. But the next story, we're still in New York. Next story around the association is about the Nets and Kyrie Irving. So the Nets are optimistic that Kyrie Irving could soon be allowed to play in New York City. New York City's mayor expressed optimism that vaccination requirements will soon be lifted, which could pave the way for Irving's full-time return. So New York City Mayor Eric Adams expressed optimism Wednesday about an eventual lifting of the city's COVID-19 vaccination mandate, leading to increased hope that the Brooklyn Nets star guard Kyrie Irving might soon be able to be a full-time participant. So this is what we've been kind of talking about all year. You know, Kyrie has decided, you know, within his right, not to get the vaccine, but that means he is only allowed to play in away games, which is really interesting that with the whole mandate, like away team players who are unvaccinated are able to come into Brooklyn and play, but a home team player who's unvaccinated is not able to come play. That doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me, but that's a story for another day. So with the New York City mandates potentially being lifted soon, that would pave the way, like I said, for Kyrie Irving to be a full-time participant. So if he is able to play in home and away games, and Kevin Durant comes back, and Ben Simmons fits in nicely with that offense, Brooklyn is still a title favorite. I wouldn't say that they are the prohibitive favorite, but they are still a favorite to win it all, coming out of the Eastern Conference as well as any Western Conference team. They are deep. Patty Mills, Seth Curry, but Joe Harris potentially is still projected to come back. You have Andre Drummond, you know, big body, who is able to rebound and, you know, block shots when the situation warrants it. So this could be great. Kyrie Irving, you know, has only played in 14 games this year, putting up pretty good numbers, averaging 24, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists for the Nets this season. But it should be interesting to see what happens. Hopefully the New York City mandates get lifted. We get back to some level of normalcy, and we get a full-time Kyrie Irving, because obviously he is spectacular to watch. But last transition, everybody. Let's talk about our marquee matchups. If you remember correctly, only marquee matchup I had last week was the All-Star game, Team LeBron versus Team Durant. And as I so expertly predicted, Team LeBron ended up winning the game, which, no secret, you had a team of LeBron, Giannis, and Steph Curry. Like, I don't care who you put up against them, they should win that game. But Team LeBron did end up winning the game 163-160, bringing my season total to 23-11. Your boy is on a streak. Let's go. So let's talk about this weekend. Friday, Saturday, Sunday slate of games. Got some good ones picked out. The Dallas Mavericks are taking on the Utah Jazz in Utah. I've got the Dallas Mavericks winning that game. You have the Memphis Grizzlies taking on the Chicago Bulls in a pretty good game. This one's kind of tough. I think this one is going to be more of a toss-up. I'm going to go with the Bulls at home on this one. And then you have the 76ers taking on the New York Knicks. The Knicks, who have not lived up to expectations. I'm going to go with the Philadelphia 76ers in that game. So some pretty solid games. Mavs, Bulls, Sixers. You heard it here first. I'm shooting for another 3-0 weekend, but we shall see. But last thing, I got to give you the answer to my Black History trivia. Wow. My Black History trivia question. So, who has played the most games ever in the NBA? The most total games across regular season and playoffs. And that player is none other than Mr. Robert Parrish. Celtics legend Robert Parrish, who won championships with the Celtics back in the 80s, played a total of 21 seasons and played 1,611 games, which is pretty incredible. The only players, I can't remember who the second player is, but LeBron James is in that class as well. I think he's played about like 14 or 1500. I can't exactly remember, but he's played a crazy amount of games as well with all the playoffs that, playoff runs and finals runs that he's had. But Robert Parrish played the most ever games in the NBA with 1,611 games. But, ladies and gentlemen, that is all the show I have for you today. As I always say, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. If you could do all the good things for me, like, share, subscribe, leave comments, follow the show on all the socials, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, at Another Turnover. I hope you have a wonderful weekend coming up. I look forward to the slate of games coming up, and I look forward to doing all the things that I want to do, and I hope you get to do the same. So I love you. I appreciate you. Take care, and I will see you next week.
Just too quick for it, peeling off like the whip orange. Seen they effort, this piss poor. I got too much I gotta tend to. Car payments and the rent due. Told y'all that I'm 6 foot, but with the money stabbing, I'm 10-2. Too much that I've been through, so I put it all in that rear view. Clean money in a black whip, got old problems with the friends new. Yeah, I'm in the big leagues. Told her don't miss me. Ballin' like Houston.